Hello students, welcome back to my channel. Today we are starting a new chapter, which is chapter 14, SQL commands. So we have learned everything about the database, the basic requirement, prerequisite, whatever we require in order to learn SQL commands has been completed in the previous chapter, where we had around 17 sessions. So I request you all to go through that before learning about the SQL commands. So once you know the basics, it will be easy for us to go ahead and learn the SQL commands, right? So let us see what are the objectives of this chapter. To understand SQL commands usage, learning the data types, expressions, and operators which are used in the SQL, the use of the syntax and the constraints for SQL, commands for DDL and DML, and various built-in functions of SQL. Okay, so these are the basic objectives. So in this, you might ask, what is this DDL, DML? Everything we are going to be learning in today's session itself. Okay, DDL, DML, all those things. So let us go ahead and start with the SQL commands. So by learning these objectives, at the end of this chapter, we should be able to formulate our own queries in order to extract the details which we require, okay, from the database. So before diving directly into the SQL query itself, let us first learn a little bit of history about the structured query language. Okay, so what is this SQL? Why did it started? So as we all know, in 1970, Dr. E.F. Cott, this is the name which we come across many times in database as well. He was working for IBM, is known as the father of the relational databases. So he's the one who proposed this relational database concept. He described the relational model for databases. In 1974, structured query language appeared. So after 4 years of approaching or 4 years of developing relational databases, in 1974, structured query language appeared. In 1978, IBM worked to develop Codd's idea and released a product. Okay, this product was released by IBM. In 1986, IBM developed the first prototype of a relational database and then standardized by ANSI. So remember, though the idea was proposed at 1970, the first it was created, the practical application was done in 1986. It took almost 16 years. So theoretically, though it was proposed very earlier, to implement that, because we also know that there are 13 rules of the code which need to be satisfied, all those things we have discussed. So when it was developed by IBM in 1986. Okay, so before we move on, structured query language, remember students, it is a language like the name says, right? So we have a database and then there is a user. If a user want to communicate with the database, the language what we use is nothing but SQL. That is your structured query language, right? So there is a difference between the database as well as the structured query language. That is why we are studying them separately, right? Okay, so this is your history. SQL is a language of the database, like I told you, okay? It is a language which we use in order to communicate with the database. It includes database creation, deletion, fetching rows, and modifying the rows, etc. So using this language, we can do all these actions on a database. The standard SQL commands to interact with the relational database are create, select, insert, update, delete, and drop. Now, a few of them we have also seen in relational algebra. How does it work? We know, isn't it? So with the create, I will create a database. With the select, I'll select the required rows from the, it can be rows or a column from the particular table. If I want to insert, I'll insert a row into the table. Update, if I want to update certain attributes, I will update. Delete, it can be deleting the table, deleting the row, or deleting the column. I will use this command. Drop is nothing but dropping the table, deleting the entire table. So these are the standard commands which we use in SQL. Okay, now these commands can be categorized like this. So SQL basically can be divided into DDL and DML, data definition language and data manipulation language. Definition language is nothing but where we are going to modify the structure of the database. Okay, for that we will use create, drop, create table, drop table, view, and index. DML is nothing but where we do the manipulation. We are not changing the structure of the table, but we are only manipulating the data. So these are the commands. So these we will be learning in detail in the coming sessions. right? So first, let us see how does an SQL structure looks like. So this is my database, okay? So before that, SQL language, how does it work? First, I will create a SQL query. For example, it can be select employee name from employee table, okay, E table. Suppose this is the query, something like this, we are going to be writing a query. So how does it work? How it is going to access the required data from the database? So once a SQL query is generated, there is something called as a query language processor. It will process the language. For that, a parser and optimizer is added, which means it is going to divide it, and the system is going to understand the meaning of each of the word. Okay. Then there is something called the DBMS engine. With the help of that, we are going to further divide the SQL query and try to understand the meaning. And then along with that, there is a file manager and transaction manager who is going to support the DBMS engine. And then the required data is accessed from the physical database. Okay, this whatever the required data we have try to optimize it down here. Once we reach the physical database, required data is collected and it will be shown to the user. So this is how a SQL architecture looks like. So this you need to learn the diagram. Now let us go ahead and study the SQL commands. The very first one, like you have seen, is data definition language. Like I told you, data definition is nothing but it will modify the structure of a table. Okay, what do you mean by modifying the structure of a table? Suppose if I want to create a table with 4 attributes and 3 rows. This is the structure of the table. Suppose I want to delete a column. That is again modifying the structure of the table. I want to change okay, I want to delete the entire table, again, modifying the structure, isn't it? But what about data? I want to just change the data that from, suppose there is a name called as, or a register number 101. From 101 to, I want to change it to 100. This is not modification to the structure. This is just the updation of the data. So that comes under your data manipulation language, right? So data definition language defines a conceptual schema providing a link between the logical and the physical structures of the database. So logical and physical. So if you remember, we had studied this 3 schema architecture where we had a user here, we had the database here, and then we had a physical schema here, and then we had a logical schema here. These 3-tier architecture we had studied, isn't it? So what does the data definition language does? It provides a link between the logical and the physical. It provides a link over here. Okay. The logical structure of the database is a schema. So what is a schema? The logical structure. How does a table looks like? This is nothing but a schema. Okay. The sub-schema is the way specific application views the data from the database. So certain application, whichever we are using, how that views the database is called as a subschema. Now these definitions you should be aware of. So what is the functions of the data definition language? DDL defines the physical characteristics of each record. Field in the record, fields data type, length, fields logical name, and also specify the relations among those records. So what is the meaning of this? Suppose I am creating a table. What is going to be the name of the table? What is going to be the name of the attribute? What is going to be the data type of the attribute? How long? What is the length of the data type? For example, if it is a number, can I enter only 2-digit or can I enter 10-digit? All these things is defined by the data definition language, right? Data definition language describes the schema and subschema. This we have already schema. What is schema and what is subschema? That is also defined by the data definition language. DDL indicates the keys of the records. Okay, so whether it is a primary key, all the keys we have studied. So all the declaration and definition of the key, whether it is a primary key, foreign key, alternate key, candidate key, all the types of keys, whatever we have studied in the previous session, all these keys are defined by who? Is defined by the DDL. DDL provides means for associating related records or fields. Now that is once again nothing but, since we spoke about foreign key, if there are many records, association is formed. Of course, we know that association between records is formed with the help of a foreign key and primary key. That is also defined by the data definition language. Data definition language provides a data security measures because constraints. There is something called as a constraints which we apply on the database. That is also applied with the help of a data definition language, which helps us in the security of the database. Okay. Data definition language provides logical and physical data independence. So because we spoke about the three schema architecture and we know that the link between the logical and the physical is provided by the data definition language, we also know that three schema architecture provides logical and physical independence. That is provided by the data definition language, right? So these are the basic functions of the data definition language. Let us see the commands which belongs to the data definition language. The very first one is a create command. What does this do? Creates a new table, view of a table or other object database. So if we want to create a view or a table, then we will use the create command. Alter command. What does alter command do? Modifies an existing database object such as table. If you want to modify, for example, you want to delete a column, you want to delete a row or any modification you want to do to the structure of the table, then we will use a alter table command. Okay. Drop. What does this do? Deletes the entire table or a view. Okay, we are going to learn what is a view. So table or a view. Anything if you want to drop, then we will use the drop command. So these are the main three commands used in DDL. Now next we have is data manipulation language. What is this DML? So DML provides the data manipulation techniques like selection, insertion, deletion, update, modification, replacement, retrieval, sorting. So many application. Apart from changing the structure of the table, if there is any other operation, everything will be handled by the data manipulation language. Okay. For example, you want to change the name of the student. For example, you want to change the insert, add something, you want to delete it, update, modify, you want to retrieve a certain cell for whatever the data is there in the database. If you want to retrieve also, we will use the DML. Okay. DML facilitates use of relationship between the records. Okay. So this also helps us in relationship between the records. DML enables the user and application program to be independent of physical data structure and data structures maintained by allowing a process data on a logical and symbolic basis rather than physical on a physical location basis. So just like our DDL command, even the DML is going to help us in order to achieve the physical data independence. DML provides for independence of programming languages by supporting several high programming languages like COBOL, PL1 and C++. So DML also supports the high-level programming languages. So let us see which are the commands which are used in DML. So insert command. If I want to insert a row, then I will use the insert command. So creates a record. So record here is nothing but in a table. When I say a row is called as a record or a tuple. So if I want to create a record, then I will use the insert command. Update. Modifies the record. You want to update a column value. You want to update certain values. Then I will use the update command. Delete. If I want to delete the records, then I will use the delete command. So these are the basic DML commands. So apart from DDL as well as DML, we have something called as a DCL, which is data control languages. So what does they do? Data control language consists of statements that control security and concurrent access of the table. Okay. So basically, whenever there is a database, if you want to grant or create a user, allow a user to use the database, and for example, there is a database and many users want to use it. Okay, user 1 and user 2. You want to give a different level of access. For example, if he is a CEO, then the level of access will be different compared to, for example, a clerk. His level of access will be different. CEO will be able to access all the kind of financial informations, wherein which clerk is allowed to use only the basic level of information. Such level of security will be provided by these DCL commands. Okay, it will tell us what kind of a permission to grant for a user. So see the commands here. Grant. So what does grant do? Gives a privilege to the user. What all privilege you want to give to the user will be given using the grant command. Okay. Suppose I want to take back those privileges, whatever I've given. So then I will use revoke command. Revoke takes back the privilege granted from the user. Okay. So basically DCL data control is nothing but here we are going to control the data what a user is fetching or accessing using the grant and revoke command. Next, we have data query language. Data query language is nothing but how I am going to access the database. So I have a table, I have records, I have all the information in the table. I want to query the table. For example, select only the student whose register number is 101. So it's a certain query I want to write. So how am I going to do? That time I am going to use a select command. So this is also called as data query language. So data query statements are used for performing queries on the data within the schema of the object. The purpose of the DQL command is to get some schema relation based on the query passed on to it. So certain query I'm going to pass. For example, select from table where register number is equal to 101. I'm going to receive that particular record from the database. We can define DQL as follow. It is a component of SQL statement that allows getting data from the database and imposing order upon it. It includes select statement only. Okay. So we will be using in the future sessions the select command, and you will realize that select command is most commonly used command when we want to query the database. Okay. And the last command of today's session is TCL, that is your transaction control languages. What is this transaction control? So transactions group a set of tasks into a single execution unit. Each transaction begins with a specific task and ends with all the tasks in the group successfully completed. If any task fails, the transaction fails. Therefore, transaction has only result, success or failure. Okay. So for example, you have inserted many rows. There is a table. It had already two rows. Now you are inserting 1 and 2. And suddenly you realize that you do not want this. Okay. So that time what you can is you can go back to this point. That is called as a rollback command. So what does a rollback do? Uses to cancel or undo the changes made in the database. Undo. Basically, we are undoing the changes we have made. For that, I will use rollback. Right. Commit. What is commit? Commit used to deploy or apply the save. For example, I have done till here. Now I do not want to roll back or I want to save this. So that time I will use the command commit. So once I commit, this is permanently saved. All this is permanently saved. Now if I apply rollback, then it will not work here. As in, it will not be undone. This is just like the save and undo command what we use in Word document. If I do undo, it will do it. It will go back to the previous step. But the moment I click save, after that, if I try to do undo, it is not going to work. Similarly, your rollback and commit works in database. Okay. Save point used to save the data on the temporary basis in the database. I can use a save point command. For example, I can use save point and I can give certain name S1 and for a particular step. For example, after entering 3 rows, I can use a save point. Okay. So it's after save point, if I'm adding 4 more rows and if I'm using the rollback, then what happens is until the rollback S1, if I put, then until S1, it is going to be rolled back. And before S1, whatever I have done, it is not going to be rolled back, though I have not used commit. So it is temporarily saving the data is nothing but your save point. Okay. So we will be seeing them all practically in the coming sessions. So as of now, these are the theoretical part. Right, students? So hope these sessions are helping you all in your studies. So kindly subscribe and like my channel. So thank you for watching.